Welcome to this edition of Ball Fields and Blackboards. Craig, Dennis, Brian with you here. A lot of stuff going on this time of year. We're right on the heels of the NFL draft. I'll let you guys start out. I've got a couple of questions, but any particular thoughts you guys have?
Every year I'm floored that people care.
Oh, Craig is...
It's the draft. You have to pay attention to it.
I am shocked how many people care about it. I am floored.
If you're a football fan,
what did it say?
A long way to September.
It drew 900,000 people in Pittsburgh over 3 days. Isn't that what it was? It set a record for the most people to ever attend the draft. And of course, it's Pittsburgh, so that kind of makes sense.
Not much else into
right.
It,
so it gives, but it's a football crazy city and area, so that makes sense.
Joking.
Right. I know. Well, I thought the thing that stood out, you hear the criticism every year about taking running backs too early, but yet the Love from Notre Dame went third to Arizona. So
that was on my list. 20 years ago, when I was writing for a particular sports econ blog, I wrote about Reggie Bush. Just this positional value problem that running backs. It's not that running backs don't matter, but any individual running back is not enough. Even the very good ones aren't enough different from others, and depend so heavily on the offensive line that it doesn't make sense. Now, I got grief from some econ guys. Well, if this weren't optimal, they wouldn't be doing it.
Right.
Oh, my, okay, whatever. Yeah. But a few years after that, the league seemed to catch on to this. But you continue seeing this. Ashton Jeanty last year picked 6, I think. But it's interesting if you think about, the guys, the running backs that were in the AFC Championship, or not but the league championships this year and the Super Bowl, were these guys drafted? James Cook, Kenneth Walker, Travion Henderson. I had to look up those guys' names other than Kenneth Walker.
Well, and you also see Jeanty last year went to the Raiders, who were really bad, and this year Love goes to the Cardinals, who were terrible last year. You could see it make more sense if it was a team who just happened to luck into a top 10 pick. If it's a team who had made the playoffs and made a good trade and got a top 10 pick, they need that and it fits. But to take a guy that early at a running back when you've got so many needs across the board on your team, that's
and I hear that the Cardinals quarterback room this year is going to be Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, and Carson Beck.
Well, that's what they said. So one of the biggest winners of the draft was Jacoby Brissett because the Cardinals didn't take a quarterback.
Yes, of course. Depending, one guy was joking. Well, depending on what Jalen Hurts does this year, he may be the Cardinals quarterback next year. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Says the Cowboys fan.
Oh no, I know this was an Eagles fan.
Well, of course, Eagles fans say this. As it turns out, that's what we do.
He was joking. So. I mean, this is a writer, but no, the running back thing is interesting. Look, other than the quarterback, no one guy can just change the fortunes of a team overnight. But there are guys at positions. A defensive end, an edge guy, isn't so dependent on other guys to make an impact. An offensive tackle isn't that dependent on other guys to do his job, a cornerback. But a running back is totally dependent. He's ragging on me about Cowboys fan, but we agree on this. Look, Emmitt Smith was a good running back that one of the best offensive lines ever turned him into a Hall of Fame all-time leading rushing. Now, other Cowboys fans listening, oh no, Barry Sanders could juke, but man, he knew how. Okay, Barry Sanders could run through wide open holes too. Yeah. But that's the thing. I mean, I looked at yards from scrimmage, the list of top guys this year. Well, it's a bunch of guys that didn't make the playoffs. Bijan Robinson is a fantastic running back. Might be the best all-around receiving, rushing. But was he the difference at Atlanta being good and not good? Well, no. I mean,
he was a first-round pick as well, wasn't he? Relatively high for them.
And the difference between this quarterback, as we talked before, there aren't enough decent quarterbacks to go around. There are enough quality running backs. It's demand and supply here. The positional value is sort of the demand, but then you also have to consider how many people there are. And we used to joke, well, you can always draft the second string Georgia running back and turn him into Terrell Davis or somebody. Not Terrell Davis, the Denver running back, Davis.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank as well. But
I'm sorry.
won a Super Bowl with them.
I thought it was Terrell. I was going with you. So.
Won a Super Bowl with them. So.
Yeah, well, we're supposed to be experts here, so we're also old.
Yeah. And other stuff, as it turns out.
Yes. But, and maybe Georgia doesn't run the ball as much as they used to, and that isn't as big of a deal as it was. But it does speak to, there are these guys. Who was James Cook coming out of college? Well, he's a really good NFL running back. I mean, and they're the guy the Cowboys have, Javonte Williams. There's always guys like that other teams have given up on that are talented. He's hurt for a couple of years, and now, he's just a solid running back. And so, but you brought up quarterback. It's interesting. Craig grew up around the Colts because of changes in life. Now I'm somewhat of a Colts fan. But in 2023, they drafted Anthony Richardson, number 4, based on essentially a dozen starts in college. And
where he went 6-6, I think.
Yeah,
a dozen starts where he was
and his
6-6.
completion percentage was like 54%. But he, his 40 time, he's big. It's interesting how things swing. Taylor Green was Arkansas's quarterback, had much better passing numbers, put up combine numbers equal to or better than, and where does he go? The 6th round. So you get these swings, but the real interesting pick here was Ty Simpson. This was a real sparse year for quarterbacks. So you get Mendoza 1, Simpson 12-ish, somewhere around there with the Rams, and then you got to go to the 3rd round to get another quarterback. But even then, you wonder, and this turned into a thing. Sean McVay seemed to not be all too excited about the pick, and then he had a press conference saying, he was protesting too much. No, I'm good with this. Why do you even say that that Ty Simpson, he started 15 games. If you compare him to Bryce Young and Mac Jones, he doesn't have nearly experience. His numbers are less than those guys, although solid. And those guys are backup level. I mean, Bryce Young is still starting, but that's because they don't have anybody else. So what do you think drives this where you're reaching for quarterbacks?
I think the opposite of what you talked about with the running backs. And the fact that I think running backs have been overvalued for the longest time, and therefore drafting them early. And I mean, Jeremiyah Love might be a Hall of Fame guy, but he also potentially could get, run into the ground within a year and a half, and his career is going to be mediocre. I mean, we've seen a lot of very, very talented college guys come out in that position. I've believed that the quarterback position, as bizarre as it is to say, while it's by far the most important, it's by far the most important, not just in football, but probably in all of sports, I think can still get overvalued. And so this idea that then people will reach for any possibilities to fulfill that position, I think is pretty common. And that's why we see so many quarterbacks miss in the first 15 picks in a draft, right? Yeah. I mean,
I might just tweak that a little rather than saying the position is overvalued. It's so valuable, you're willing to put guys in it that themselves.
Well, so then you run a greater risk in that position,
right,
because it's of such great value. But at the same time, then it's not just what, that losing or taking a risk on that guy. It's the opportunity cost of what you're missing out on, right, of who you could have picked otherwise. And so, look, I don't pay a lot of attention to this draft, and I fully admit that up front. But I pay a lot of attention to college football. And there were 2 guys specifically that I remember watching this past fall that I was like, when those guys were on, they were unstoppable by anybody. And that was what Caleb Downs, which is a safety from Ohio State, which kills me that the Cowboys took, because I think he could be a Hall of Fame guy. And then that Baines Jr. guy from Miami, for whatever reason, dropped to the middle of the first round. When he was playing hard and really was on, and maybe that's why he dropped. I have no idea why he was that low, but I think the Bucks might have taken him or something like that. And those two guys, whenever I watched them, when they were on, nobody could block them. They were unstoppable. And so I was surprised that those guys went like 13 and 15 or 13 and 17. I don't know what, some middle of the first round. Anyway, sorry.
Well, the idea that Simpson was a reach at 13, 15, wherever he went, helps explain why the Cardinals took Love. Even trading back to 15, they would have still been killed if they take Simpson as a quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
So they might have gotten a few extra draft picks or whatever out of it, but their position might have been, well, we need to be better offensively, and the only way we can do that is we take this guy at 3, because we're not getting a quarterback until maybe next year. Right. There's nobody going to be left after Mendoza that's worth trading back for. So maybe that helps explain that.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. One of the rationales I saw about the Rams taking Simpson was, well, we're not likely to draft this high anytime soon. So I thought, well, but that's another reason to do what you just said. That, this positional value thing really is an important idea, that some positions just don't matter enough to warrant, except some positions, if you have a true outlier, like defensive tackle, typically, if you look at pay structure, is not one that you pay huge amounts for, burn a lot of capital. But if you can draft Aaron Donald or Warren Sapp, a defensive tackle who is generationally good is incredibly disruptive, even more so in some ways than an edge guy, because you get guys coming up the middle causing havoc. That's a problem.
I'll make a little prediction that will go wrong, I'm sure, because it's me. But I'll say that the return on investment will be greater for the Steelers that took the guy from Navy than it will be for Jeremiyah Love going to the Cardinals. Meaning it was a big investment to take Jeremiyah Love there, and so they need a huge return. It's a very small investment to take that guy from Navy, and he can play.
Sixth round, is that one?
I think
fifth or sixth.
Yeah, it was late, whatever it was, and so very little invested in it. And that guy, he's going to be tougher than anybody else. Meaning I know he's not the biggest guy, but he's still 6 foot, so he's not tiny. He'll run through a wall.
I'm not disputing that guy's ability and value, but I would come back to what Craig said earlier. My sense is the running backs who look the best and have the biggest impact are ones that come into a situation that allows you to do that.
Of course.
If you're struggling on offense in Cardinals and to some extent Pittsburgh, well, that's a tough spot for a running back. And that's the thing, it's interesting. Barkley's year before last, see, running backs are back. It's like, well, he's hurt in New York quite a bit, but still, he wasn't making a difference between New York being bad and New York being good. He wasn't putting up some enormous numbers. Guess what? He goes to a team that has a really good offense. Well, now he looks like Jim Brown. The guy has the opportunity. It's tough. You know how it is. Tough for running backs. If the defense thinks you're the main threat, well, NFL defenses are pretty good at stuff.
Well, and that's why the Eagles fans were so upset this past year. Is the year before they had spread the field, they let the offensive line be dominant, and Barkley could do things. This year they narrowed the field, became predictable, and a running back can't be effective.
And then some issues on their offensive line with injuries, and it's much more difficult.
The other thing I was going to say about Simpson, you mentioned Richardson and the Colts. They drafted him in the original draft discussion from Chris Ballard, the GM, was, well, we don't know if he's going to start. We might sign a veteran, and try to usher him in slowly, which went away 2 weeks after they got him. He was the starter, and he got hurt and was terrible and whatever it was. Simpson's in a better position.
Yes.
He can learn. They did give up the opportunity to take somebody who could have an immediate impact this coming year. So that is the drawback. But you drafted the guy. Stafford's got at least one more year. If you are that high on the guy, it might turn out in the long run to be the best thing that they could have done. You don't want to necessarily say it's a terrible move just because he's going to be a backup. That might actually be a better thing.
And I could talk both sides of the fence on this. The point you're getting at here, I hadn't thought about that. The position is valuable enough, and it's so uncertain who will be good that to some extent, using draft capital to say, hey, we'll see what this guy can be. That if we don't draft guys, obviously if we don't have anybody, well, who is going to come in behind him? If we have him a year or two and he doesn't look like he can be developed, well, then we can go another direction. Maybe they can do another trade. And, No, it is interesting. Picking quarterbacks, identifying players in general is not easy. I think, like I said, the Downs of the world seem to be about the most sure thing there is out there. But quarterback, it's just the projecting based on what guys are at college to what they'll be in the pros. I mean, we could go down the list and, who's the poster child? Ryan Leaf. I mean, these guys that everybody thinks is a can't-miss guy, and guys like that miss frequently.
Thankfully, the Colts picked correctly on that one.
Yeah.
With Manning and Leaf.
Yes.
That was a dangerous scenario.
Well, and there's a reason that, and sometimes teams, the teams lucked into this, and Dak Prescott or Tom Brady or Tony Romo, and there's truth in that. But it does come back to kind of your rationale. Well, why not use some draft position? You never know when some guy might be. Now, on the other hand, you're using huge draft capital like the 49ers, 4 years ago with Trey Lance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Guy who was playing Division II or 1AA and has started like 6 games. But he looks really good. I'm still stunned.
I noticed they didn't draft his brother, who was coming out this year as a wide receiver. They didn't take him, so I think that kind of shied away.
He did win a natty, though, so I mean.
Yes. Well, let me jump over the other big thing that we have. The baseball season's a month old. Come on now. I'm gonna give Craig a chance to jump in here. Your Reds, we're in Reds country here. The Reds have been looking good. What's their strength this year?
You're not the Phillies.
Yeah.
That's a strength for everybody else in the major leagues, especially if they're playing the Phillies, as it turns out.
And the Mets.
Well, the Reds haven't played the Phillies. They're waiting until the Phillies come out of their funk.
Yeah.
Then they'll be
only team in the
Phillies
league
and the
without
Mets.
10 wins at this point. Yeah. So.
The bullpen has been, as much as hard it is for me to say something positive about a bullpen for any team, the bullpen has been pretty good for the Reds. Starting pitching's been okay. Their offense has been objectively awful. So how they've won, they've come back in a number of games, which is kind of their thing right now. They've scored runs late, had some late wins, and they're crediting that to the bullpen holding them into the games and letting their offense come to play late. I don't know if that's the magic bullet in Cincinnati right now, but they've got top 2 starters haven't pitched an inning this year, so hopefully those guys will be back at some point. But as a Reds fan, you don't get too high and talk about how great things are going in Cincinnati. You just it's April still, so we'll say it's going well. That's it.
I want to bring up the Mets, partly because our buddy and former podcaster with us, Chris BOC, he's a big Mets fan. But they're a very interesting case. They and the Phillies have the exact same record. They're 10 games under 500. I've noticed since July last year, they're 47 at 73, 25 games, and they've got one of the maybe the second highest payroll in Major League Baseball. So it's one thing if, the Royals are doing this, but for a team that has that payroll, and there's an interesting post a guy, I think a sports writer had. He goes, look, I'm not out pushing to fire the GM, but he goes, it is interesting to think about. So David Stearns came from Milwaukee where he'd done a bang-up job, but it's a different job. In Milwaukee, their budget constraints are such that you really have to be on top of every trade, every player, the development of players. You can't, there's no money to be wasted. Whereas in the Mets situation, two things arise. Maybe you're trying just as hard, but part of the trouble is it's a little bit like college coaches. Do I go after Shohei Ohtani? But I keep missing on Ohtani. The Dodgers keep getting those guys. And by the time I get a guy, I'm getting not the guys right below them, but the guys below them. And so, that who you're recruiting in, in many ways, the Mets roster, if you think about the $500 million or whatever they're spending, you don't look at their roster and go, man, it's a testament to, sometimes money gets you a lot, but sometimes money gets you a bunch of guys that, I'm not expecting these guys. Some of them may be underperforming, but if they're performing at expectation, they're not going to be anywhere near the best team. Forget the Dodgers, even the Braves. The Braves have a much more powerful lineup and better pitching staff. So it's an interesting problem of who you go after. The Mets seem over the last couple of years to keep going after these same guys that the Dodgers are going after, and the Dodgers get them. Or
I was going to say that the whole time you're saying that, I was thinking, and therein lies the reason that I think the work stoppage is going to be brutal when it comes around for baseball, because not only is there schizophrenia between the owners in terms of we want this, no, we want this, and so they can't decide. I think even within organizations, what is it that the Mets want in terms of the structure of the league? I don't know that they know anymore. Like, I think there's teams. I think the Dodgers are uniform in what they want.
Right.
But
everybody.
Yeah. Like, we want to be in control and do everything. I think they know that. But I think there's a lot of teams like the Mets that have got themselves stuck here. Like, what do we want? Do we want to play this game of trying to outbid the Dodgers, or do we want to play a game of let's get the best talent under a budget? And so this payroll cap, is this going to become more solidified? Is it going to be less solidified? I think there's within teams, they don't know. And so if you don't know yourself, how are you going to make some negotiation? Yeah. And so I don't know. I know that's not what your question was and everything.
Yeah. No,
and I have a very little sympathy for the Mets right now just because I'm a Phillies fan and we are equally as bad, if not worse. So if we look at our run differential, I think we're 60% worse than the second worst team in Major League Baseball right now. So we're brutal.
But I shouldn't say that. Your team. The Phillies are kind of in the same situation the Mets are. They spent a lot of money in the offseason, signed a lot of starting pitching, relief pitching, and that was supposed to be the real strength of the roster right now.
But the difference here I would draw is that I think that the Phillies across the board are underperforming everywhere, where the Mets, even if they were performing at their talent level, I'm not sure they're as good as what the Mets think they could be. Where the Phillies, they've won the division multiple times in the last few. I think they're close to being able to be with the Braves or win that division. They're just way underperforming. So I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe I'm just seeing it through.
There are interesting things the Mets did. Some that to me are head scratching. Look, signing Bo Bichette, that's fine. Lindor, Soto, but letting go a lifelong Met who has been among the top 5 power hitters in baseball the last 6 years, when you could have easily, the money he got at Baltimore, the money they're paying out, it's not too shocking that an offense that wasn't that good last year, in fact, struggled the second half, is even worse this year. You let Pete Alonso go. What do you expect? And again, he's not killing it right here in April, but you let Lonzo and Nemo and McNeil go. I mean, one really, really good hitter and two solid hitters, and you replace them with guys that are either unproven or like Marcus Semien on the way down. So, I mean, Mendoza, if they keep going, just like Joey Cora, will probably get fired. But to me, this is much more of a GM issue than it is, I don't know. I mean, we can rearrange the batting order 15 different ways and still have the same guys. I'm going to come. Joey Cora is an interesting case. I want to bring up the automated ball strikes. We talked about it last month, but we have data now. It's sort of interesting. I was looking at this through roughly 27 games per team. I looked this up yesterday. On average, there have been the middle for teams were 55 challenges. The max was 78 for, I think, Minnesota. And max was 78. I forgot who that was. But the minimum was 32 for the Red Sox. They were basically one per game. You could extend that through the season. Even if they never got a challenge right to retain a challenge, they'd end the season with 162 unused challenges. And I heard John Smoltz this weekend say, they challenged and, you got all these for late innings and when it's highest leverage. I thought, well, again, this is the same logic would apply. Well, we can't start Jacob DeGrom in the first inning. We got to save him for runs matter just as much in the first inning. Now, again, if you're a guy who has very poor judgment up there at the plate and you're 0-2 and nobody on base, okay. I mean, leverage probably does enter in some. The other thing in this is interesting, guys challenging what are really marginal calls. That would be one thing as a manager. Okay, you can't be challenging, and even if you challenge and win by 0.2 millimeters, that's not what we're using this for. 2 inches, if you're challenging that, you're just, that's your ego going, hey, or just your eyesight, your perspective isn't that good. But I found it interesting how diverse the range is, and that Cora was basically taking and I don't know if they got fired for this, but it was basically, but I do suspect it would lead to some dissension within the team of saying, no, you guys don't challenge. That would be frustrating as a player. Wait a minute, that ball was 6 inches outside. Well, no, I'm not letting you challenge. So both of those, what do you think about Cora's firing and any thoughts on the... Now, I'll let Dennis speak here. Your thoughts you gave me on the ABS the other day are...
Oh, I think this is very... Once Major League Baseball has opened the idea that ABS is better than the umpires. And that's what they've said in essence, right? Because if
we need it,
we're going to allow somebody to challenge, and the right call is the ABS, right? So once you've said that the ABS is the right call, then what you've now agreed to is we're going to let the umpires do a worse job than we could already. And I think once you've done that, you're on a slippery slope that the umpires, in terms of calling balls and strikes, will be replaced.
Probably right. Now, I will say one thing that this has already done. It has diffused a lot of the chirping at the umpire. Because there was constant... No, I mean, I'm not disagreeing.
Hold on. I was going to say, the thing that hasn't slip-slided is the umpires chirping at the players.
Yeah, no, that's right.
What's really shocked me.
In fact, Saturday, one of the games that I read later, the player, it was close. The player he didn't say anything. He just sort of body language, and the ump initiated. Well, challenge it if you want.
Right.
What?
Really? Yeah. They're challenging players to challenge calls, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah. If I'm the league,
But I will say, I'll come back to the Cora thing real quick. I haven't followed this that closely, but given what you're saying, it would not surprise me that he had lost the locker room in some way. That, in essence, telling players they can't challenge is saying, I don't trust you. And once you've said, I don't trust you, like, oh, okay. Now you either better be winning because you're that good as a manager, or if we're not winning on a regular basis, you're going to lose the locker room in a hurry. But I don't understand how managers in Major League Baseball cannot trust their catchers that are out there. Mm-hmm. Like, I can understand
catcher
how you
has
tell
the
hitters.
best view. Or pitcher.
Yeah,
Pitcher is he's falling off.
Well,
and,
pitchers tend to be really volatile in terms of emotional. And batters up there, there's probably a few guys that, look, you've got a good enough eye. If you need to challenge, you challenge.
But their
everybody else
isn't very good.
Yeah, I'm telling you, don't challenge. No, my hitters generally are not challenged. But my catcher, I'm saying, look, manage the game. That's your job behind the plate. And know when are we more leverage situations, and know when they're big misses. So big misses you can call anytime for a challenge. Small misses, make sure they're under leverage. And so, but you got to trust your catcher at that point, don't you?
Well,
and I just don't get it.
I'll follow that up too. It seems to me too with this system. Why are you worrying so much about pitch framing? I mean, the other day I saw a catcher let a pass ball go by because he's like, well, I got to move. Well, look, now again, you have a limited number of challenges, I guess, so maybe there's a reason there. But with ABS, there really is less purpose in pitch frame. I mean, look, I'm a skeptic that it makes as big of a difference as the analytics guys think it does. Partly because one of my arguments is that, well, umps know you're doing this, and they can actually see you moving. And so, the more you move, in fact, there was a quote from one up to a young catcher saying, son, when you move your glove like that, that tells me it's a ball. And so I'm not convinced that I think a lot of the analytics are just noise.
But if we want to get rid of framing, get rid of the umpires.
Yeah. No, and you may be, look, I don't disagree. I think one day, I don't think it's going to be the next year or two, but I think you're probably right eventually.
Yeah, I think that's the direction it's headed. Again, it goes all the way. They've opened the door.
Yeah.
And I think once you open the door to this, you can't close it. It's only going to become more and more prevalent.
It's just like, and I don't get you start with this, but it's like video replay. I mean, we can complain about it, but ultimately the root of it is technology. Once you start having slow motion replays, it might take 2 decades, but it was inevitable that you're going, because there's a sense of, wait, that's not right. And when that gets strong enough.
But it's the same concern that you've had with this ABS, why you don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And I disagree with you, but it's the speed, right?
Yeah.
The problem in, say, football with all the replays is it slows down everything. There's no reason for this to be slow. This should be at a rapid pace. And if you could do the technology where you can figure this out in a hurry. And so they've just done this with like the first down markers, right? Mm-hmm. We don't need to bring chains out anymore. Right? That slowed down the game.
Yes.
They've used technology to speed it up. Awesome, right? If you could do that with replay, I'm in favor of replay. My problem with replay now is it slows down the game. And in college football, it's insufferable as it turns out. So
you don't think the Major League umpire should have to walk to the dugout to look at the video screen to see if it was a ball or strike, and then turn on his microphone and make an announcement and then go back?
I dare say that I have turned the channel more times from one of those calls than anything. And again, I don't watch a lot of baseball, but yeah, that's a good way to.
Well, one of your things over the years, and I totally agree with it, has been, look, whether you put in 30 seconds, a minute, or what, you have a timer, and if there isn't conclusive evidence in that time, then it defaults to whatever the call on the field was. We're going to look at it till we can get it down to the millimeter. Well, and we're going to take 3 minutes because, we want to get the call right. No, there's a balance of getting it, quote, right versus slowing the game down.
Yep.
Yeah. I was going to say on the core situation, the idea that he had lost the locker room, that was one of the first things I thought of. But there have been multiple articles come out with players blasting the Red Sox organization for getting rid of him. And again, it can be easy to find. You've got 26 guys in there, so you can find 3 guys that are probably upset about it. But there's also a lot of discussion that Cora and, is it Breslow, whoever the GM, whatever his position is, that was where the real issue was. So I'm curious if it was him, the GM, that was saying, don't challenge, you're not allowed. And I don't know. I've not seen that yet. So I'm curious to see whether that was Cora's approach or if that was an organizational approach.
Clearly, there's a trust issue now
somewhere.
Between the administration and the coach, the coaching staff and the players. Somewhere
where that break is.
That's got to be the case.
It's very difficult to tell these postmortems because you know how writers they tend to be much closer to the coaches, and so you know the writers. But it is unusual to fire a respected manager after a month, and so that month firing does suggest something like this tension that you're mentioning. A couple of quick hits here. One, this comes from a couple of months ago article we had circulated among us of Major League Soccer. There was a piece on their attendance down 5% and missing out on, you know, they're changing the calendar. The calendar is going to start going next year to the same as the rest of the world, you know, fall, spring, winter, and then off of the summer rather than their summer-based calendar. But doing that, you know, they were saying it would have made sense to do that before the World Cup because the World Cup does spur interest. Now, I was looking up numbers, and you can take this for what it is. Look, I use ChatGPT a lot, and I think it's incredibly valuable in many ways. But there are certain things like on this. You ask ChatGPT give me information on MLS viewership or NBA viewership. You get a response that sounds like they're the PR firm for the NBA, you know, MLS. Oh, it's great. It's never been. Well, it was not quite as good as last year, but last year was the greatest. But you dig in a little deeper. You know, the viewership numbers. You know, MLS has this total Apple streaming. Mm-hmm. That this is a very interesting sign. Both MLS and Apple agreed that the agreement was to run through 2031, somewhere around there. They've both backed that off, and now it's going to end 2 or 3 years earlier. I think, interesting.
Shocking.
That tells me that viewership isn't all that. Now, part of the reason they go there is because, well, see, this viewership is, you know, they're getting the young viewers, and that's valuable. Well, if you're not getting them. So we talked on the podcast maybe 4 or 5 years ago, you know, this ascendancy of MLS. And look, then on the new season, there have been some big turnouts in certain cities, but as a league, not just certain cities, as a league, especially as somebody like Lionel Messi retires, one of your marquee guys, you know, again, none of us are great forecasters. I'm not sure anybody really is, but do you see MLS sort of plateauing? Do you see it sort of staying steady? What do you think?
Do you want it?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I've got this huge soccer chunk that I want to get into.
You know, just I'm not sure.
I'm not sure we've got enough time for you to go through all my soccer information. So I'll let you go first.
The idea that they're going to the fall, winter, spring type of schedule seems as dumb as I can think of in the MLS. I think it's going to really, really hurt the MLS. Can you imagine if you're a mild soccer fan or want to take your kids, but you're in New York City and you're going to take them to a New York game in January? Oh yeah, that sounds fantastic. And if the Jets or Giants are in the playoffs at the time, oh yeah, no problem. They'll fill it easy. Yeah, but at least it'll run concurrent with the German and English league because that's what soccer fans in the U.S. are really concerned with.
I guess
this just seems.
I guess my
asinine.
Question back on you on that would be, well, question is, where are the New York? I think your point would be valid. Where are the big turnouts in Major League Soccer?
Well, Atlanta seems like the one huge one, right?
And it's indoors, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't even know. But Portland and Seattle are big markets. I mean, I think attendance wise. I don't know LA, I think, but LA's not going to be affected by the weather regardless of when you play it. But the further north you go in the United States, this weather is not going to cooperate, and you're going up against football at the time.
I guess that's the other question that I don't have data on is maybe this would be good for you to look, but what's the substitutability, as we might put it, Econ, between soccer fans and football fans? Are these drawn from totally different groups, or is there quite a bit of overlap? I don't know.
I would guess that they're fairly unique, but the Venn diagram has got to overlap at least somewhat.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'll piggyback on that. I was surprised. I didn't know when the season for MLS was to start with. So to read that they were going to have, is it now they're going to have May and part of June as their off season? That is going to be the break for the season?
Well, I think, starts in mid-May. If you do like Europe, I don't know exactly, but Europe is sort of off from mid-late May to mid-late August.
That's the break.
Yeah.
That was my first question. Why are we taking off in the United States summer months for soccer when that would have seemed to me to be, if I am bored in the summer, and it would take a lot of boredom to get me to go to an MLS game. But if I'm bored and I want to go to Nashville to see a game, they do have a team, right?
Yes.
Okay. It would be May, June, July, and now those are going to be the months when they're off. So that, again, to me, a soccer, bottom sports soccer, as far as my fandom is, that was the shocking thing to me, that in the United States we're taking that away as a summertime option for entertainment.
So during Christmas break, you don't want to take your daughter down to an MLS
I've already
game in
bought
Nashville?
tickets. That's going to be my first trip, but we're not going. We're going north. We're going to go to Minnesota to see a game.
If you're going to suck it up,
hopefully
then suck
it'll
it
be
up
cold.
pretty good.
We need we need to have Chris back on. He's our resident soccer fan. He does actually attend Nashville games.
Okay.
All of us thought that the Apple deal, you better cash a really big check, because the number of fans you're going to get from that versus general streaming television services, whether that be through Fox or whoever else you were going to have it with before, that check had better be huge, because the amount of interest you're going to get in the MLS is going to go down.
Well, this same thing with F1 going to Apple from
same
ESPN,
thing.
And when I asked you about this, I don't know if you remember what your reply was. Why would they do this?
What's the purpose other than just dollars? The only purpose I can see in doing that is it's all. In some points you would say, well, it's partially attributable, F1 doing this to no, this is 100% attributable to financial, because it is not going to draw. The number of people who are going to watch is going to go down. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yep. I mean, I was a fairly regular F1 watcher. I haven't seen a single race, nor will I, this entire year.
Well, it also mentioned, and again, I'm coming at this from a non-soccer guy. It mentioned in the article you sent, or at least one that I read, Apple had kind of mismanaged this start to the season. They weren't doing the pre-game show for a couple of the early season games. They waited till 3 or 4 games into the season before they had actually instituted their pre-game show. And the reason why was one of the initial games was Charlotte, St. Louis, and they didn't think that would draw a lot of interest, which goes back to why would that be your opening weekend game? Yeah. Anyway, there was some real mismanagement on the side of, if we're using Apple to draw fans, they have to at least be putting forth 100% effort to do it. And if they're not, if they're dragging their feet, that doesn't make sense at all.
Well, it's the same with these Major League Baseball games on Friday nights. The best 2 games Friday night, even though I subscribe to this MLB package, I couldn't get. They were on Apple. Well, I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to additionally subscribe to Apple so I can see the Cubs and Dodgers. Right. I'll watch them tomorrow.
Right.
And I'm thinking, Major League Baseball, again, part of it, I tell people, sometimes you hear, even sports writers, many others, well, this business, they're just interested in making money. I think, well, yes.
As are other businesses.
Yes, I'm not quite. Your business is interested in making money. I think the mistake that they make in their analysis is, well, yes, there is a difference between just short-run maximization of revenue or profit versus long run. And I don't look, outfits that aren't sure they'll be here next week, I get you got to focus on the short, but outfits like MLB and F1 that, okay, we're going to be here 10 years from now. Why are you fixated on this short run revenue or maximization?
Now, I will say, from F1's perspective, whenever they first went to ESPN, this is, close to coming on a decade ago. I don't know how long ago, when they first started streaming on or putting their material on ESPN, they gave it to ESPN. Mm-hmm. They didn't charge them whatsoever. And so it really was to build a fan base.
Right.
Now, what I think they've done is overestimate the strength of that fan base, right? That they think that fan base will now follow them.
The Netflix documentary changed everything.
Yes, will follow them wherever they go.
Right.
And I think some will, but I don't think that loyal of fans were that big. And I think the MLS was smoking a crack pipe if they thought that people were like, oh, they'll follow us in droves to go to Apple TV. Like, you got to be out of your mind.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head with F1. The Netflix documentary has been strong every year. The Drive to Survive continues to draw in more people. That doesn't mean those people are watching, are paying to watch on Apple to see the races. They'll continue to pay for Netflix to see that series, the eight-part series or whatever it is. That doesn't mean they're going to go from watching free races on ESPN or whatever it is to paying to have another subscription to watch.
My wife watched one of the years of that series. She hasn't watched all of them, but one of those years of that series and thought it was pretty good. She's never watched a race.
And you're not paying an Apple subscription for her to be able to watch.
Yeah, I'm very confident she would be like, say what?
Right.
Another kind of quick take here on developments. The NCAA, the Big Ten and SEC couldn't come to agreement on how to move to a 16-team playoff. And this sort of speaks to your point about, if two leagues with obvious, seeming similar interests can't come to an agreement, what hope is there that MLB players and owners that are all over the map will? What's the hang up here? Why? It seems to me that, okay, you'd rather have this, you'd rather have that. But just in general, 16 versus 12, you're both going to win if you move to this. The revenue's going to go up. Marginally, you might get a little bit more if you do it one way or another. So why?
I think the argument now, though, is 16 versus 24. It's 16 for the
24.
SEC and 24 for the Big Ten.
Really? I did not know
pushing
this.
the 24. I thought that's what I read last week.
I don't know.
Is the Big Ten is now pushing the 24. The SEC's pushing the 16, and evidently, from anonymous sources, the 24 has more support than the 16 does.
Man.
But the goal is 24. It's clearly we're trying to make this like the NCAA tournament where we're going to have we're going to have massive numbers, and that's what I think the issue is. Going to 24, and I'm not trying to soapbox this, but going to 24 is you saw the issues this year with having teams in it that were borderline or maybe shouldn't be there. And the interest of watching games in the second half was gone. You had some games that by halftime people had turned the channel to something else. You go to 24, you're bringing in teams that don't have massive followings. That's the real risk.
Well, and then if you're going to do that, you've got to have some kind of play, bias, because you can't have 1 versus 24. I mean, because you'll just have more of, or even for that matter, number 6 versus 24 won't be a very good game either. Again, like we've talked, football is a different animal than basketball. And even basketball is, I can't remember if we brought this up last month or not, but, the mid-majors of the world and the below mid-major, in some ways turn the NIT into the mid-major championship, because you have these clubs like Belmont. Well, this corresponds to the idiocy of these conference tournaments. Belmont runs away with the regular season tournament, and then they're sitting at home. Now, I think they got an NIT, but, and the NCAA tournament just seems to be going, as you would think. I mean, it's there. Yeah, the Cinderella stories happen now and then, but it exists for the big clubs.
When was the last time a Cinderella won it?
Well, we've had some in a second.
Yes.
Butler and Butler.
Yeah. Again,
but no, you're right. I could not. And this year there was very little juice for the.
I think Villanova in the 80s is the last time a real Cinderella.
But they were a Big East team, so they came from
again. But I think that's
Villanova and NC State would.
They were a big.
That's how far back
they were big underdogs. Right. I'm not sure you can call them.
Well, last year if I'm not mistaken, all 4 number 1 seeds made the Final Four.
And that's going
last
to
year.
NIL guarantees that going to get more heavy.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that because that was one thing that caught my eye about the draft. As we talked, as NIL has turned, Houston Christian becomes a feeder for WKU, and WKU becomes a feeder for Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt becomes a feeder for Ohio State. That it's amazing how many Ohio State and Texas guys, and with some others thrown in, that the sorting that used to take place in the in drafted guys in the training camp is now taking place
in college.
Sure. Right.
If I saw it right, I think there was one player from Conference USA that was drafted this year.
Yeah.
In the entire 7 rounds.
Yep, one.
What? Wow. Yeah. Now that's not too shocking given this sorting that's taking place.
That's amazing.
But that's how quickly this has gone from, hey, you can get a couple of players and really develop them. They've got a skill set. It's just undeveloped. You can develop them. They might be NFL players. Well, you get them now and mildly develop them, they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing you originally asked about the 12, 16, 24, whatever it is, don't you guys think the reason there is support for the 24, it's because it's support from the Power 4 conferences that if we go to 24, we know we're getting the majority of the extra bids, which means that's the majority of the money, again, coming back to us. Even if we go to 24, that's not more bids for the American. That's not more bids for Conference USA. It's more bids for the Power 4, and that's more money in the pockets of, and maybe even hosting first-round games at our, which is, again, more money in our pockets.
Well, and I wonder, I guess then the question goes, what's whole SEC back? The question I would have as SEC commissioner is, how much more are we going to make from going from 2016 to 24?
Right.
Look, in either case, we're going to get the lion's share of the bids. Yes, we'll get more of our clubs in.
Look, it's pretty clear that it's just the SEC and Big Ten that are driving the boat here. Right. So they get to make the choice, and the others can agree or disagree, but they're going to go along one way or the other. I think you're right that you get the other conferences to go along with 24 quicker, just because instead of one team, maybe it's 2, maybe 3, right?
3 in a certain year.
Yeah. And so, but even the Big 12s of the world, the ACCs are going to get more teams, and so they're willing to go along with it. But I do think that what you said to start with, this is all about arguing about marginal revenue generation. This is, I can't imagine these are like, and it's marginal in terms of what's my share versus your share. Like, oh, hold on, well, I think I can get,
right,
like 38% instead of your 35. Like, well, that's not good enough. I got to have at least match yours. And so this is kind of a contest between the SEC and the Big Ten of who's getting what revenues, as it turns out. So.
Well, there's also the issue, if they go to 24, the discussion is they've got to get rid of the conference championship games. If they go to 24.
Well, then we should go to 24.
Go to 24 tomorrow.
If we can do that.
The ACC and the Big 12 aren't going to lose a ton of money if they go to the conference champ. If they lose their conference championship games, they'll make it up by getting an extra team in the 24 field. The SEC is going to lose however many millions of dollars. So if they go to 24, there's got to be some guarantee that we've got to get enough teams in those 24 that the money from the playoffs makes up for what we lose for having conference championship
that's what the Big Ten's direct argument is. Where the SEC has not argued that, said we'll make up for it by having enough teams in. The SEC has, I think, gone the opposite direction, but I think that's been exactly the Big Ten argument. Like, we'll get rid of it, but we got to have some guarantees that we're going to get.
And the SEC makes the most of any conference on their conference championship game. The SEC has made the most year in and year out, so that's their natural aversion to this plan.
Well, the last thing I'll hit on, big story the last couple of weeks, this Mike Vrabel down to Rossini, the reporter, and I was talking to the guys before. At first I thought, well, clearly she's breaking her the New York Times ethical code. I can see why she would, even though she played herself as the victim, as photos continue coming out, she's no victim. But then I was reading it and realized that, wait a minute, as Dennis was calling her the secret agent. Now, who all she's working for, nobody knows. But from the NFL perspective, and New England and other clubs, this brings up issues of, well, when she gets so close to one coach, what information is not just she getting from that coach, but what information is she feeding this franchise about, well, this player over here is unhappy, or this GM's willing to move this guy. And look, I think she's the extreme example of these quid pro quos that exist. But as one writer was talking long before this ever broke, he's going, look, you got to take a bit of what these insiders say with a grain of salt, because there is a quid pro quo that whether it's GMs or it's agents, that agents are feeding these NFL insiders info. They're not doing it for free. The insider is, whether they're acting as a surrogate PR guy for this guy in other instances, or they're helping them out or boosting them up. And this has always troubled me, even back when I was writing for a couple blogs. Couple writers for the Tennessean who, they wrote decent stuff, but you could tell, and you've seen this from, quote, beat writers forever. The guys that were really hanging with the team were very reluctant to come down on guys that they felt like, I need this relationship. And I saw it even more so. Michael Silver, nationally known writer, was writing for Sports Illustrated, and he was interviewing some of us for the blog. And I remember reading in one of his posts about how, even with Jeff Fisher's struggles in Tennessee, he was really defending Jeff Fisher. Well, guess what? Jeff Fisher was one of the most amenable guys in terms of, a guy like Mike Silver calls up Jeff Fisher. You're getting, he's not pulling a Bill Belichick on you. I'm not taking that guy's call. And so, again, I'm not saying none of these relationships should exist, but there is this insider world. I won't name any names, but, when I was writing negatively one time about a particular sports commentator.
Can I say his name?
No, no.
Sure.
I was a nobody writing for a publication that was national at the time, but he gives me a call. I'm thinking, and Charles Barkley had noted, he goes, that was the biggest headache of my job at TBS, was kept getting, these texts from, why'd you say I had a bad game? Why are you down on me? Because, just dealing with these egos. And so there is this, it's not just Hollywood. The sports world is full of image management. And so, that the role of these Diana Rossinis and Adam Schleckers and others, the insiders, they're not all holding hands with coaches, but there are these transactional relationships.
Well, they kind of are, as it turns out, right? That meaning,
well, yes.
If I only
was trying to be nice.
There's actual proof of them holding hands.
I've seen the pictures. Right. Look, I feel bad for both of them in the fact that anybody, whether that reaches celebrity level, that their personal life or even personal mistakes now become massive public news. I mean, I feel bad for them in some way for that. But is there a conflict of interest in what reporters do? Well, this is the extreme case. Obviously, there's a massive conflict of interest if she was breaking something that was, deathly important type thing. If this was a more political scandal type thing, I almost call it a spy type of thing, right? Because they're supposed to be even-handed in this. This is sports. I'm not taking it quite that serious, as it turns out. But you can't be fully, weigh things in the balance and still ask for somebody to provide you information on a regular basis.
Well, and this is why I, over the years, really have paid the most attention to the guys that I'll call just truly analysts. Guys, not that they may on some occasion have some conversation with some NFL or other sports figure, but they're not constantly just on the phone with it. Hey, they're telling me this is my view of it, not my, PR spin. I have a guy who used to write called the Dr. Z on Sports Illustrated, Paul Zimmerman. He gave you the straight business. Now, again, he knew guys and had built up a reputation. But, and some of these guys are kind of jerky, the Skip Baylesses of the world, but at least those guys aren't in bed, figuratively or literally, with the people that they're covering, and then that gives it at least some objectivity, even if it's sometimes not correct.
Yeah.
Well, there's some indication that there were teams, coaches, general managers, whoever, players, not necessarily as many players, but administration that had stopped talking to her insider type information or giving her, because this had become a common knowledge thing in the NFL for a number of years. This wasn't hey, this just happened in Phoenix or wherever it was 2 months ago. If this has been an ongoing thing, and there's no reason for us, even when he was at Tennessee, there's no reason for us to be sharing a lot of information with her because we're not sure where this information's going.
Yeah.
Well, we're about out of time for this month. We hope you'll join us again next month.
Hold on. If you're not watching the NHL playoffs, I don't know what you're doing at this point. I just got to say.
I'm waiting for the next round.
Oh, my gosh. Why? This is so good. So,
all right. We'll end with that. You should be watching the NHL playoffs.
Yes, you
according to
absolutely
Dennis
should.
Wilson.